Evening's meeting of the Scrutiny and Improvement Committee. Thank you especially to the members of the public who have chosen to attend tonight, and to Councillor Morgan and Audra for coming along for a presentation as part of our agenda this evening. First item on the agenda is to sign the minutes of our meeting on the 6th of November. There's a typo on the agenda, should be 2018. But are committee members happy that I sign the agenda as an accurate record of the meeting? Thank you. Apologies for absence. We have a full house tonight, I'm there. Declarations of members' interests, as we're discussing issues around potential compensation, etc. Here, it's important that any interests are declared. I assume there are none. And so on to our presentation by Councillor Colin Morgan, who's also a portfolio holder. Councillor Morgan, thank you very much for attending, and I shall leave you to do your thing.
Thank you, Chair. So, thank you very much for the invite. It's the first time I've actually been here since I was the chair, so I'm a little bit apprehensive and quite nervous, as you'd expect. So, you asked us to give an overview, really, and a presentation on where the direction of travel, particularly with respect to the unitaries. And the session, as it says on the slide here, will cover these. So the financial direction of travel, the medium-term financial plan, MTFP, the capital programme, quick highlight on that, current issues, nationally and locally, and the reorganisation. The financial direction of travel, this is really important actually, because this evening you're not going to get any wow moments, I'm hoping, on this short number of slides, because actually we have to operate as business as usual. That's the most important thing. And actually within SIPFA, the code 2126 clause, it actually states here, as you can see, an authority's financial statement should be prepared on an ongoing basis. So that's very important. So actually we're looking at the future of the local authority as if it was here, but obviously we're mindful that there are other things going on outside in the other parts of the world. And with this particularly business as usual, it helps to plan going forward. Of course, you'll also see the numbers of the strategy this Thursday in even greater detail than we'll get tonight, as I say. The key thing really is that services will continue, and actually when you think about it, services need to continue regardless of who sends the council tax bill. And you'd have heard me speak before at strategy or full council back in the last year, particularly about the money situation where we were perhaps at risk of spending more than we had. And you'd have heard me caution that we need to be careful, because even if we're wound up, obviously, there's still going to be taxpayers here and we still have to deliver services. And we've always been, for the last number of years, well run, and we need to keep it that way going forward. So, in terms of the financial direction of travel, we have the revenue budget, which consists of 5 main elements, this one and the next slide. And I'll give you a quick highlight of these. So first of all, we have the government grants, the settlement funding, and this has been challenging. You can see that in 2019-2020, the year coming up, we have a 6.7% reduction in our numbers, which brings us to 2.434 million coming in from that settlement. That's already come down, down to 2.70 million, so you can see the drop there. And therefore it's very important to keep managing the risks. We've got quite an active work programme, as you've already seen. In fact, very active work programme. And we've obviously got a lot to deliver within the money we've got. So let's focus back on some other numbers. We have the council tax number, which is the increase for 1920 gives us a total of 4.725 million. You've already seen the 4.23. If you've already seen the strategy papers, you'll see the numbers for this week putting forward. The numbers here are really the latest numbers we have, which are going to strategy. And then we have the national non-domestic rates, which is the so-called business rates. And this is quite a challenge to us here, because you can see the number we have coming in the current year forward is 5.187 million from 1920, and this drops away quite dramatically, potentially to 838,000, that is, in 2021. So you'll see when you hear me talking about a big drop in income, it's because of this, and that's why we have to be particularly watchful, as you'll see on the next slides. The real reason there, of course, we'll be able to keep some, that 838,000, is because of renewable energies from the business there with the wind turbines, in actual fact. Many people have been against wind turbines, of course, at various times, particularly for planning reasons, and of course they have given us a source of income, and of course from a sustainability perspective they help with the carbon element. So that's the slide 1 and slide 2 of these. Then we have the other elements of the revenue budget. The new homes bonus, which actually makes it 21%, and is actually quite a volatile source of income in actual fact, because there's been many changes to the new homes bonus over the years since we had it. If you look at this as always potentially risky income, we could have a potential risky of another £3 million being knocked out of the equation, or being not as we projected. There's no guarantee that money will come in following a major review which is expected in 2020. So we have to manage the risks, we have to keep our reserves, and we have to operate within our means. And we should not rely only on this. And then finally we have the fees and charges, which should come to approximately £6 million. And that's really based on such things as the income from our commercial property, projected to generate 2.357 million, and then we also have planning income at 750,000. And the real problem we have to watch out for here, of course, is the impact of Brexit. As we all know, we're not quite sure what will happen there, and obviously confidence, particularly with businesses that we have here on the motor trade and auto sector, they could have a triple whammy on us, of course. So we could lose income from rented units, we could lose the NNDR, the business rates, and we could also have a spike in our costs as well. So there's a lot to watch out for, and we have to be very prudent. Moving over to the local government budgeting for us, the so-called MTFP, Medium-Term Financial Plan. Basically what we do here when we tabulate this, and you'll see on the next slide, we look over the next coming years. So currently we're going to 23-24 of the cycle, looking ahead. And it's obviously to deliver a prudent and affordable, and most importantly a sustainable budget to achieve our objective. And our core objectives in terms of the MTFP are about value for money, which is really about doing things, delivering services efficiently, economically and effectively, and also maximising income, keeping the council tax in line with the increases with the referendum, so we keep the money coming in, we don't overburden the taxpayers of Daventry district, but we are sensible with our income generation, and also, as we said, about being prudent. And I think a good example of this is the recycling and the new scheme that we have in place, which you can see after many years actually chairing this meeting as well, where we've had problems with the previous operator. Now having the joint venture with Norse has given us superb delivery of our efficiencies, and it's also bringing money back into the local authority as well, as again you'll see on the 4 strategy papers. Here's the MTFP as it will be presented at strategy. And there's a couple of arrows on there as well, which I wanted to point out to you. Basically, you saw on the previous slide that the non-domestic rates, the business rates, there was an impact of the falling of that down to 838,000. The first arrow you can see there on the 2021 column, that is the effect of that. You can see the drop between 1920 to 2021 is quite considerable, so it's over £4 million. And this then actually has a deleterious effect on the projected surplus and deficit. So the plus figure you see, again with the second arrow, is pointing you to a deficit for 2021. And there is an impact here which we'll come to depending on what happens with the unitary. But please be aware of this, and if you hear me speaking again about being careful, we can't take for granted that we've had a very good position. We've run the council very prudently the last couple of years, but there is a potential impact there. And this actually cuts away quite sharply down to 2023-24, where we're showing an operating deficit of over 4 million per year. And that could of course mean, to get that back on track, we may have to cut services. So we need to be very careful. We're not asking you this evening to take any particular focus on what could be done, but it's been alerted for your attention, and I'll do the same as well at strategy on Thursday. And this then gives us the reserves position brought forward, which you can see down at the end, has moved from a position this year of closing on 17.429 million down to 6.927 million. So over the cycle, we dropped by £10 million. And given that our policy is to have a 2 million reserve minimum there, this gets us quite close. And you can see with the level of dropping away, the year after, if you were to put this on 24-25, it could actually mean we breach our own rules in terms of that reserve. And the problem, as we know, is we can't only cut our way back to a good revenue. We have to basically plan ahead now so we don't get into that situation. Essentially, once the reserves are gone, they're gone, so we need to be very careful. I'll move on to the next slide. Here's some of the capital receipts. Now, of course, really the capital receipts come from particularly people, operators buying land from us. And the most important thing here to note is, again, there is very little actually coming in the way of the capital receipts. So if you look really the line, the 2021, so next year and beyond, we have the sale income from the site 8 East, the futures development on Middlemore. That brings in the 1.75 million, and we have the right to buy, which is locked in there at 250, and of course is a depleting asset because we're not replacing those, so it's a dwindling resource in actual fact. In terms of things we'll be spending the money on, of course, we've got some big ticket items. You all know we discussed the cinema at quite significant length, and also Reach for Health. You know, I warned against some of those schemes actually in strategy. I warned against Reach for Health, but obviously members were minded to vote on it, and of course that's coming back to strategy on Thursday. And we've also got a few others there peppered about. You can see, for instance, the cadet scheme council, and again this will be spoken about in more detail on Thursday on as well. So basically we also have finally, every year we have to make further investments of £922,000 in a rolling capital programme, which has to come from revenue, just really for the upkeep of our assets, etc. So a good example would that be such as home repair assistance, etc. I'll move on to the next slide. We have impacting on all these, particularly the business rates and the income. The B word, I'm afraid to say. Well, of course, we're not immune from that because of business sentiment, community sentiment, could have a big impact upon us. I won't really need to say any more about that, but obviously it does have a triple whammy. Then we have the Fair Funding Review and the Settlement Grant, which of course a new formula could benefit us in a couple of years' time. That'll be implemented from 2020. The current system is based on older data, where our grant is based. We then have the business rates retention. Currently we are a 75% pilot, and we've seen the benefits of that in the earlier slides as well, and seen some of the benefits of that across the community. The business rates actually bring in £48 million, but of course we know we've had the local authority across a number of years against a backdrop of austerity. Then we have more local issues. We've seen homelessness, and it feels like unfortunately every strategy meeting for the last number we've asked for more money, a strategy for homelessness. And we've spent already £400,000 expenditure on homelessness, meant to cover bed and breakfast. and because of the Onerous Reduction Act, which of course we've discussed here at Strategy previously, that could grow further. The main issue here is development. We've got a lot on the agenda. You'd have already seen, if you'd have seen the library, that the work has already started. At the Abbey there, they've got the banners up and the caging around already, you'll see maybe tonight, and that's made a start. We've got the pension costs, which also has quite a significant impact upon us, particularly due to the deficit, which costs us roughly £2 million per annum. And we've got the other factors such as the two together really, the NCC and the reorganisation. As we know, any cuts at NCC can have an impact upon us here, particularly where it's third sector funding, and we're perhaps sometimes picking up the bill there, and the reorganisation, which we're going to cover briefly on the next slide. So, the impact of the reorganisation. Well, first of all, let's have a look at some of the timelines here, what we're watching very closely. We've already had the negative order to cancel local elections, which has been discussed and we've spoken about the meetings and debated. The next key landmark is the expected Secretary of State decision, deciding on whether the two unitaries will go ahead, as per the paper we submitted. And then it goes to Parliament for the structural change order. Should be April, of course. As we know at the moment, there's congestion in Parliament, and it could have a delay on this. And of course, these are the timelines we have, and we understand it currently, but things can change, and they could have various impacts upon us. And that's why it's very important, as we said at the beginning of the presentation, to plan for business as usual, which is very important for us. So let's not spend all the money. The taxpayers of tomorrow are still here, and we need to keep supporting them with our services. Other key points, as you see, go through, all the way down to that very key target date of the vesting day next April, and then the elections thereafter. So everybody, I think, knows without any date there's a hell of a lot to get through. It's an incredibly demanding timeline, particularly given the programme of work we've also committed to as well, including, of course, recently the addition of Reach for Health in the addition to the work we said we'd do.
May I just ask at this point, how much input are you expecting to have on the budget mentioned up there for the new authority? Obviously, the new authority is going to inherit a proportion of our financial situation, so you'd imagine that 151 officers from across the county and portfolio holders or cabinet members would have some involvement.
Absolutely. There's a key point actually, and that is the creation of the shadow authority there, and that is the point where the statutory officers take their roles, including obviously the CFO, the CEO, and the monitoring officer. And within that, basically, there's a very important note, and that is basically in the PwC report, it stated it was 29.9 million required for the transition arrangements and to get us to the new authority. We've already got 17 million of that allocated from the business rates pilot, and then there is a further 4 million between us. There is currently a £9 million shortfall to that, and for that we've actually budgeted across. We've actually taken our budget of 1.125 million to make a contribution to that transition.
Is that just for West Northampton, or is that for the North as well?
That's for both actually. So 29 million for both. So within the structures, we said that key line, and then obviously the oversight of our budget as well, and the creation of the new budgets. And that's why it's really important that ours is business as usual, because it needs to be a reflection of where we are and reflecting that new local authority going forward. I think with all of those, they are the key landmarks, but of course, as we know, they are subject to many debates and discussions going ahead as they become clear. And I suppose the next critical one, of course, is March, as it's only the end of next month. And of course, we've also got Brexit the end of next month.
So, Councillor Ritchie?
Yes, just on that last slide, on the timetable. As we know, the programme has slipped in terms of time, and given events in Westminster, it's quite likely to slip further. If it slips to the point that vesting day cannot be on the 1st of April of next year, then the whole thing will go back by 12 months, is my understanding, as it has got to be tied to the, a full financial year. Does that mean that you have a draft budget that I understand is the end of August, that you hope that the draft budget for the new authorities will have been prepared? Do we at that stage, is it possible at that stage, we will also need to have a draft budget for next year for Daventry District?
I would say yes, but I'm going to check with Audra. Yes.
So if everything gets slipped by a year, all of these things will get slipped by a year as well. So we won't be doing a draft budget for the new authority. We'd be business as usual, and we'd be setting a budget for Daventry. And then in that following year, this would again kick in as to doing the draft budget.
The new
for
timetable you'd roll the year.
Yeah.
And from a budgeting perspective, what degree of slippage is permissible? At the moment, clearly you can't produce a draft budget. You can agree a draft budget before you've got parliamentary approval. If that is scheduled at the moment for July, August, okay, you might catch up if it was September. You might be in desperate straits to manage October, but there's got to come a point at which you've got to say, I'm sorry, we cannot produce that draft budget. We cannot make these plans in time for the 1st of April. What would that point be?
Can I just take another point actually there? Because what really concerns me as the resources portfolio holder is actually the 1.572 deficit we show in 2021. Because at the moment, whilst that's planned in, my understanding is that therefore then requires another approval because we'd be taking a deficit across to the new authority. But the fundamental thing is, at the moment as we understand it, that timetable is set and we have to operate within it. But the most important thing is the business as usual. And the 1.572 is the, even though I think overall in the big scheme of things you could say that's relatively minor, it still shows the deficit which we take into the new local authority.
I think Tony wanted to chip in.
Yeah, I think perhaps yourself, Councillor Ritchie, the key issue there to set the timetable is the structural change order. The structural change order will determine when the shadow authority is active from. So if that happens in April or thereabouts, then we will know for sure what the dates are. And as that, if that slips, then clearly there will be an issue.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just follow up on that, my understanding is that the structural change order is, according to the present timetable, will be put before Parliament on the 19th, in April 2019. But its approval, would its approval be made at that point? Or can it be assumed to be approved before sometime in July, August?
If I can come back on that, Chair. As the chart shows there, the parliamentary approval announced for the consequential change order. Now, the structural change order will be laid before Parliament in April. It does need some time to go through Parliament. But our understanding is the government would be confident about that getting through in the required time to actually be effective. Certainly at the time of laying the structural change order, there'll be much more clarity around the dates. But I think as the point has been made, as at the moment we are planning for a budget for the unitary via the shadow authorities for the year from April 2020. If anything changes, then we would need to produce a budget for here.
I think Councillor Robertson has a question, but I will just say, Councillor Morgan hasn't come along to give us the nitty-gritty on the move to unity.
Yeah, I appreciate that actually, and I think it's a learning episode for all of us.
Hypothetical anyway, based on whether or not it slips. So
I think the main point is actually for us is really about being prudent, operating within our means, recognising that in 2021 we do have a deficit presented, and being cautious and sensible and delivering the programme that we've set ourselves, and really sticking to that course, but being mindful of the other activities. And of course, that being delayed could well be delayed by Brexit, which if it's a no deal could be a much bigger problem for us, potentially. So that's the much bigger story. And I think our job as our local authority is to business as usual and keep a tight rein on things and deliver the services which our public are expecting from us. And apart from that, those dates, I mean, they do get a bit confusing, but I know Councillor Ritchie are very well briefed on it as well. I've got one final slide then, and that really is what I probably just said actually, and that is we'll be in a strong position up to 2020. For the last number of years it's been incredibly well managed as a local authority. We've been very prudent, and my concern as portfolio holder for this is, I think, a little bit over the last couple of months we've been potentially a little bit prone to not think so much about our spending. And again, I want to use this opportunity to say we need to be very careful not to hand over a deteriorating situation to the new unitary, and still remember that the people in this town and across the district paying their bills will still be paying their bills in the future, and we should not give them a worse local patch for the new unitary. And I'll keep saying that in my role as portfolio holder won't last, and we'll keep looking at those numbers. So we've given you a look at the overview. The main message is there's an ambitious work programme on. Again, strategy will be very action-packed this week, and there's lots to present there, and hopefully that helps give you a picture of where we're going. The key message is business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morgan. Do we have any further questions from committee members? Councillor Ritchie?
I've got two. Two areas. The first, the financial projections, the five-year plan. I would imagine that it is almost very easy to forecast how much it will cost to provide the services that we'd like to provide over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I mean, that's easy. It's the income side, when it comes to projecting what the income side is, because no government is ever going to say that, here is a scheme that will exist indefinitely. It will exist for a period until they say that at a certain point we are going to review it. And I therefore appreciate the caution that if they haven't given a guarantee, you don't put money that can be guaranteed into your figures. If you go back 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, have medium-term plans not always looked roughly similar, that you would have a few years of balanced budgets or even surpluses because you know where the income is going to be, followed by tailing off into years of uncertainty. If you were to project these not just 5 years ahead but 10 years ahead, assuming we weren't really organised, we wouldn't have a clue where our income was coming from in 10 years' time. So while I appreciate the caution, if you put it into a sort of context, is it actually any different from situations that the Council has faced in the past? And particularly that, of course, that the problem is non-domestic rates. We know what the scheme for non-domestic rates will not be. But given that non-domestic rates is not just a major issue for Daventry District, it's for every other council in the country, there is, I know you can't bank on presumptions, but there is a presumption, surely, that the government will look for an alternative, perhaps not as beneficial, but an alternative method of making local government possible.
This is an interesting question for me, actually, because as a Conservative, obviously, I'm looking to the government to make sure they play their role in supporting local authorities, but we've only got the information we've had for the last number of years. And as we all appreciate, we've been on an austerity drive from central government, and it has had quite an impact on local authority finances. And I think the real answer to that is we have to plan as we know. with the information that we have available, looking at the direction of travel as we've called the slides, but not plan to go to a deficit situation. I mean, planning to do that would be a dereliction of our duties, I think. And actually, should anything come, and those numbers are better in subsequent years at the end of the cycle, as it's currently shown, then that would be good news, but a lot of it is down to careful planning.
But it's still not clear as to whether this is something that we're looking at as a problem now, as distinct from a pattern that we would have faced in many previous years.
It may well be. It may well be. And the other point is, I've heard it said that Audra actually has been very prudent in the past. And actually, quite frankly, part of the reason we're probably in a relatively good position as we are is because of Audra's prudence over a number of years and the rest of the senior management team. But maybe Audra would like to add a comment, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I completely get the sentiment of what you're talking about. I think the point we're trying to make here is that when we're a relatively small district, and as soon as they bring in policies like the business rates retention, like the new homes bonus, whilst they may change and come back in another guise, they're of such significant levels of income that any change to it could have quite a big impact on us. If we take new homes bonus, for instance, £3 million currently, that's 21% of our net budget income. Yeah, so you don't need to have a lot of change, and even that in itself has been cut by a third just in the time that we've had it. So there's already been £1 million shaved off that to when that first came about. So business rates, for instance, £5 million that just, under current policy, it will go to £800,000. And what has changed in terms of going forward, because I hear what you say in terms of being able to set how much do you think services are going to cost. And whilst the county council may be in the sort of the mainstream highlight of the pressures, it's very, very well known in terms of adult social services, children's services, and it's those pressures from those services that will take that share away in terms of that income. So yes, it will be, the pie is only so big and it's how it's distributed. So yes, I expect some of that to come back, but certainly not at the levels that we enjoy now.
Thank you, Audra. I think also, Councillor Ritchie, there's politics here, obviously, and a Conservative government is perhaps minded to have a smaller state and smaller local authorities, almost seamless behind the scenes, whereas, of course, a Labour government may have a different view on these things as well. So,
I regret that will not be relevant.
but it may or may not be, but that's the point. Politics at the top level drives what we get on settlements, and our job as a local authority is to plan as best we can within the means that we have and to cut our cloth accordingly. And I think we've done that very well.
It just goes to show how much we really are at the mercy of the decisions taken by central government in terms of the crumbs that they throw to us.
I very much hope those numbers were very clear, those 5 key income areas, and helped you think through that. And of course, there have also been the training as well, so the SIP training, etc., that Audra ran. Unfortunately, I couldn't personally attend, but those very well attended. 17 members.
And a training session on the mid-term financial plan a week tomorrow, I believe. But thank you very much to both of you for coming along tonight. It was very illuminating.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm going to take the retire to a chair now, if I may. And it's
more than welcome.
Spot you on the spot. So,
I'm just going to retire.
thank you, Rick.
Next we have our regular update on the corporate strategic plan.
Oh, do you want me to... I've got...
it's always just really weird.
It is a weird mess, but I'll correct it.
Doesn't seem to.
Good job with your hair colour.
You're on the CSP quality,
That's the one. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I won't present these ones as well.
Go on.
More than welcome.
Oops, sorry, do apologise. There you go. You want that, don't you? Okay.
Yeah, just. It's quite nice to hear Councillor Morgan talk about business as usual and some of the things going on, because I think it is a fact that we are all very, very busy and there is an awful lot going on between Brexit and the unitary. I don't know whether we're busier than we've ever been, but certainly very challenging. And I'm really pleased to say that given all those challenges, our performance is looking really, really good, and certainly probably better than I've reported on for the last 3 or 4 years. We've only got, out of our 33 measures, there's only one that's currently in the red. So I could be very quick here and away in a few minutes. We have 4 in amber, 1 in red, 27 green, which gives us 97% within 5% or more. So I don't know whether you want me to touch on the ambers. We predict that all of the ambers will go green by the end of the year, and we're not predicting that there will be a great deal of change. So I don't know whether you want me to mention those or to just talk about the red one.
If you could just mention them vaguely, please, areas of interest from the committee members, then we'll delve further.
Right, well, 2.2, the transport and economic strategy. It's been amber the last 2 quarters. There is work ongoing and work is progressing, and it's anticipated that it will certainly be very close to target or on target by the end of the year. So obviously some of these things just take a few months to actually work through. E1.2. Increasing the percentage of council floor space with EPC rating. I'll just move that along there. You'll see this is currently in amber at 69%. The reason this is in amber is because we do believe it will achieve at the end of the year. Just obviously because it's predominantly buildings works and building alterations, you don't get the rating till all the works are complete. So work is ongoing, and as you've all seen around, there's lots and lots of things going on, and it is anticipated that that one will hit target by the end of the year, which seems quite close already, actually, doesn't it? So H1.1. Again, this is in amber because we believe it will reach target at the end of the year. This is number of E-enabled services. Number of things going on. Obviously, there's a lot gone on this year already, but they're looking at EU accessibility, planning portal online changes going on, skip permit requests, voice-enabled council services for waste lookup. So lots of things in progress there, and lots of things changing. So it is anticipated again.
Can I just add to that? I mean, you may see in the comments there that there's a reference to LGR, local government reorganisation, reform, however we choose to describe it. What's happened is that we're starting to see some work from our IT team towards that, which has meant that that's become a priority for a period of time. But we do expect to get back on track by the end of the financial year. But I think that will be a challenge for us as we move into next year for sure.
So again, H4.1, this one's in amber. And obviously this one's always a bit of a difficult one because it does depend on kind of how many people ask for funding, etc., or ask for help, but there's an awful lot going on there. It's certainly within 5% of target, and certainly won't be far off at the end of the year, but again, talk about business as usual. This is about residents benefiting from voluntary sector services, and there's an awful lot of work, very positive, very good work going on there.
Noticed on that one that there's quite a significant drop from the figure in Q3 of 17-18. Do we have any background information on that? We're at just shy of 39,000 this year, whereas it was 48,500 more or less in 17-18. Just leapt out at me.
I'd have to go back and ask that question.
Can I ask how these figures are compiled?
Sorry.
I mean, the 38,955, I mean, where does it?
Comes from the voluntary organisations, doesn't it?
Yes,
We
yeah.
relate back to us.
Yeah. Well, we do verify the data that comes in, so we know it's come from a credible source, and we have various data checks in place. But as to why it's varied from last year, I don't know, but I can ask the question.
And you would have this somewhere, there would be a breakdown as to which organisations we're talking about, the different numbers
Yes.
and so on.
Yes. I mean, it does give you some information there that, DAC car scheme journeys,
I
but
see,
so it does give you a breakdown of some of the things that go on.
No, my concern is that obviously we were talking about numbers and organisations. The level to which people are assisted, the levels to which people need assistance, can be very different. And it just strikes me with these, you need total figures, but the total figures are putting together, perhaps equating somebody who got a lift from DACT with somebody else who perhaps had a much more pressing and therefore time-consuming issue if they had a major problem that had to go to CEB and so on.
I mean, I
think it's a fair point, but probably not a question for you.
Yes, it's not. I have to say, it's not my service. It's one that an awful lot of work goes on. They do an awful lot of good work, and everything we do in terms of our measures and the facts that come in, it's all very documented as to what counts and how numbered. We have quite a robust process in place for verifying data, so that we are comparing like with like all the time.
Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, it's not your service, but it does, it's obviously lower than we'd like because it's in amber, but it does look low, starting fairly low and then just not really picking up. And I understand it's slightly, we'll call it demand-led then, let's say, it's what people do. It's just really just assurances that with everything that's going on in the council, are we putting full promotional and information out there to ensure that everybody knows that they can do these things and we are here to help them.
Further down the agenda is an update on my assignment now on voluntary services support.
Yeah.
So
I will say, yes, we're all aware of Brexit, we're all aware of the possible unitary. It very much is business as usual, and people are certainly getting on with their jobs and carrying on. And certainly at the minute, the unitary work is at kind of higher level, and there will be a time when it begins to impact, and we possibly have to prioritise some of what we do. But at the minute, it's certainly not the case.
Yeah. I think I can just sort of add to that. Looking at the measure and the target for 18-19, they're very near misses for the first 3 quarters. So we're thereabouts. And looking back over the previous year, it does seem to be a bit of a spike in the third quarter of 17-18. So I think if we can provide some information to explain that. So
I'll go back and I'll ask for that information.
Thank you.
So that's the 4 ambers, and the one we've got in the red. So the reason it's dropped down, as you'll see, from 100% to 78%, and there is a complicated reason for this. And again, this is, all about how we get our data, etc. And this is percentage of internal health and safety audit recommendations that are actioned in a timely manner. And what actually happened was, prior to this last quarter, looking at just this year's audit recommendations that have been made, they were completely on track and were at 100%. They were then audited by Limited Assurance, and they actually said you've also got to consider outstanding recommendations that hadn't been completed from last year. So hence that has dropped it down to where it's currently sitting. So that's why we've suddenly... Oh, sorry, do I need to do that? There we go, that's better. That's dropped it down to this 78%. They are on track for this year. All agreed health and safety audit recommendations have been completed for this year within the timescales, but we have got some unmet actions from last year that are still outstanding, and these are actually, one of the biggest ones is to do with there's an awful lot of work's gone on in the building to meet fire regulations, and some of it takes time, and we're not convinced it will actually be finished by March, but there is a lot of work going on. It won't be far off, but that's why that's dropped into the red.
Do we have a definition of a timely manner?
There will be one. I mean, it depends on the seriousness of the recommendation, to be honest. So that's why it says a timely manner. If it's urgent, we would expect it to be done.
I think, Chairman, if when the audit is carried out and the actions are identified, then a target date is set for ourselves, and it will vary depending on the issue.
I was about to say, having read through a fair number of health and safety audits, myself, they usually tend to come with a target date.
It will say, urgent, medium, not, within 3 months or whatever. It will depend on the urgency.
Sorry, Councillor Wesley first, then Councillor Robertson.
I'm not sure if I may have been done here, but surely we should have brought forward last year's recommendations into this year anyway, shouldn't we? Should they not have been included in the numbers without question?
Well, that's what they've said.
That's what they've said. I'm just saying it's a little bit worrying that we didn't.
My understanding is that it took us a little bit of time to get to that conclusion, which
I see. Okay, sorry.
No, I'm sort of agreeing with you.
Forget about it.
That initially we seemed to not take that approach. Is my understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think just to offer some assurance to Councillor Wesley, they weren't forgotten about, they just hadn't been calculated into this calculation.
Okay.
I was simply going to say that, getting down to this business of timely manner, I would have thought it would be relatively straightforward with things like alterations to the fire regulations, or not so much alterations, but improvements to the fire regulations in the building. Wouldn't have been that difficult to program in, or is it a matter of money?
I think, Chairman, it's not a matter of money, it's a matter of finding competent contractors and their availability to carry out the works.
Procurement and, nothing's ever quick in getting the best value and the right contracts, the right procurement, etc.
Can we, via either you, Tony, or you, Julie, can we ask for a more substantive update for our next meeting, just so we know...
What, on that one?
Yeah, on that one, please, just so we have a bit more flesh on the bones and know what we're...
It'll be year-end as well, which will help, so we'll have a complete picture.
And I think, if I can just add one other comment, this was part of a report that went to Corporate Committee last week and the week before, very recently, and it's certainly on their agenda as well.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so yeah, as I say, it is a good news story, and particularly given the challenges going on. There we are, overall 97% of active measures within 5% or better. So
that's good news.
Good news, yes, and it's really good not to report about the waste service being in the red.
It's good news.
Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to the rolling work programme. Sorry, Councillor Rich.
Okay. I just wonder, it's possible that observers are equally fascinated by everything that we're going to discuss this evening, but it's also possible that they may have particular interests, and in which case, if it doesn't matter to us,
I can preempt your point, and if it's to the satisfaction of the rest of the committee, shall we take assignment 28 first? And Thank you very much. And just for this one, Councillor Wesley, if you can just take the chair for the debate.
Certainly, Chair. Well, Councillor, I believe this is your assignment, so I'll hand straight back to you to let us know what you believe and what you've come up with.
So hopefully you'll have read the report. Just to give a bit of context to this issue, this is of course the return of a report that was considered last year, at which point we decided, due to feedback from the senior management team and the ongoing nature of our work, the work of Councillor Ritchie and myself, that we would make an interim recommendation that the Council quashes the proposed sale of 32 houses. That of course was approved by full Council, and so members may recall that in the report that went to full Council, it was actually commented that the Scrutiny Improvement Task Panel had may have the phrase slightly wrong, but essentially that we'd fulfilled our duties and that no further work was required. I disagreed with that, simply because I thought that it was important to look further into the background of the matter, see if there were any further areas of concern and any further issues that needed addressing, despite the fact that I think councillors across the chamber were extremely happy to pass this decision to quash the sale of the 32 houses. So essentially what you have before you are 4 recommendations, the first of which in italics and on the paper has already been taken. That's there simply to remind ourselves of what we did previously. Now the other 3 recommendations, the report itself, when it was an interim report, did highlight the potential impact of the move to unitary authorities. However, I feel that TDEC or DDC, as the landlord, has a duty to inform the tenants to the furthest extent possible about how a potential change of landlord may affect the tenants. So that's the reasoning behind that particular recommendation. The third is simply good business sense, and the business manager has already commented to me that that will be done as a matter of course, but I thought it would be worth leaving that in there. Now the fourth is probably where Councillor Ritchie and I part ways to an extent. So it is essentially a recognition that whilst in my interpretation of the facts, DDC didn't conduct itself improperly, either in its legal obligations or in any real moral sense. Things could have done better. Things could have been done better. There could have been, slightly more clarity along the way. And the reasoning behind an apology is simply that when people feel that they haven't had the best experience as a taxpayer, as a tenant, in whatever context, then an apology is a positive step to take. It's the right thing to do from a moral standpoint. I've put in there without prejudice apology, simply to highlight the fact that, in my understanding of the facts, there hasn't been any legal wrongdoing. Ultimately, I'm not legally trained. I'm not here to make a legal judgment in any sense. However, if we're speaking as a layperson on the balance of probabilities, I didn't think there was sufficient evidence to warrant any further action than the apology that I recommended. And with your permission, Chairman, I think this is probably a good point for Councillor Ritchie to come in and explain precisely how we differ.
I'd just like to say that I think Councillor Ritchie has already submitted a document to the committee explaining his views and his wish to put forward some different interpretations on the report. So we'll hear that from Councillor Ritchie now.
Well, thank you, and I'm grateful to Councillor Brown for all the work that he's done on it. We don't agree with each other. We're not going to murder each other as a result. We're not going to have a duel. I'm not a lawyer either. I'm fairly sure that DDC has not done anything that contravenes what is written in the tenancy agreements. But I'm not quite so certain that it hasn't done anything on which it could not be legally challenged. Because the discussions that took place at the time that these properties were marketed, I know that there are question marks around about it, but these discussions, my understanding is that they could be construed as part of the contracts that people were given when they became tenants. And tenants, I'm mainly about the people who became tenants when the T-Deco homes were first constructed about 5 years ago. There have been a number of changes since, and clearly the people who have taken over tenancies were not given the same marketing information. They were not sold in the same way. It doesn't mean that they don't have problems as a result of DDC's actions, but I do think that the people who have got who we're most concerned for have got to be those who were the original tenants. Now, in the note which I have prepared and circulated, I think to me there is plenty of evidence that we weren't able to interview the staff, but who were involved at the time, but from emails that we have been shown, there is certainly evidence that suggests nobody is claiming that they were not aware of the 2 months' notice clause in the tenancy agreements. But if people have a copy of the. I mean, on the third, bottom of the second and onto the third page, it's perfectly clear that the people who were involved were marketing these tenancies on the understanding that people would be there for a long time, not necessarily a legal guarantee that they would, but on the understanding that they were there for a long time. DDC at the time, and for a long time afterwards, made it perfectly clear that they regarded these as people who they hoped would have a long-term occupancy. And even the people who questioned why there was a difference between what they were being told and the small print of their tenancy agreements were simply told that, all right, it was for the protection of DDC. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that these staff were being disingenuous. All I'm suggesting that appears to be what they actually thought and intended at that time. And it was still the case when, last year, 2017, when there had been a proposal that the whole estate might be sold on to a housing association. At that point, they were given a letter which very, very clearly said that if the sale takes place, then your tenancies will not be affected. And that's why I feel, we all know the hassles of needing to actually move home. You have a group of people here who had been in their homes for 4 or 5 years, and then all of a sudden they're told that they've got 2 months' notice. Anything that they had planned to do for the year, anything that they were looking forward to, had got to be changed with the knowledge they didn't quite know when the 2 months' notice would be served, but at some point it could be served with 2 months' notice. To me, it is perfectly understandable that people would think, well, we cannot continue living with that degree of uncertainty. You can't do anything not knowing where you're going to be in 2 months' time. and as a consequence decided that they had got to move home as soon as there was an opportunity to do so. Now, of course, that is stressful. It is also expensive. They had made the assumption that they were in their homes for years to come. Many of them, I don't know how many, but quite a number, can talk about the improvements they made to their homes, money that they actually spent in their homes as a sort of investment. That investment was not something that they could take with them. You move homes, you need to move, you probably need to change your carpets, redesign your curtains and furniture. But there are all the expenses that we all know that go with a move of home. Now, that was actually bad. But what makes it even worse is then, having gone through this move, they then discover, well, actually, we've changed our mind and you didn't need to move anyway. And I just feel that in these circumstances, we can't simply turn around and say, I'm sorry, there was a misunderstanding. I think, as a very minimum, there needs to be compensation that takes account of the costs that we have caused these people to incur through making the move. And I think, too, that, I would like you can see what I've proposed in my report. If the finance portfolio holder was not around, I might have suggested that we put in a much bigger figure, because if you think of the hassle that we put these people through, many of them now living in places where they didn't want to live. Some come back. I've had somebody, the difficulty of living in a smaller house where she can't accommodate family that might want to come and visit. Others who have needed to move out of the place. A guy who needed to pass his elderly dog over to relatives to look after. People who have needed to move out of the area, which means that their children have got to change their schooling and everything else. They have needed to endure all that. And I just feel that it is quite unreasonable to think that that we will simply turn around and say sorry if you understood things. As regards the people who are left of the original tenants, I'm very surprised to find there are actually only 6. That's the figure I've had from Simon Barrs, who are still there. We discussed at the early stages of the task panel, and indeed I think there was in a draft there was a recommendation that we should look for a way of not making these tenancies, you can't make them permanent, but at least give people a little bit more protection. With reorganisation coming up, now I think there's a balance here that's got to be struck. I know that a new authority is going to need to look for everything it can possibly sell to cover the debts from the county that it is going to inherit. It is inevitable. Whether our action actually sort of puts a flashing light against the Deckle homes and say, look, here is a first candidate for sale, I'm not sure. And I prefer that we just get quiet about it. But okay, it is reasonable that we warn tenants. But I think, given these circumstances, we know that the new unitary authority may wish to go ahead with the sales. I just think we should give them a little more protection, so that instead of 2 months, I put 6 months, but it needs to be more than 2 months, because 2 months just makes people's lives totally unworkable. So I feel quite strongly that that we need to do more for some adjusting the tenancies, but for the numbers who have left, provided that they can demonstrate that the that they did not plan to leave before the letter that they received back at the beginning of last year. I don't think you can go into great lengths of asking people to provide proof, but provided it's clear that they moved because they felt that they couldn't live on the basis of only having 2 months' notice, and that would be my proposal.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, I just want to take the committee through Councillor Rich's minority report and just give my feedback on that. Because I think it's important to note one of Councillor Rich's opening comments, which is that he accepts, or that it is his belief that Daventry District Council, or TDECL, didn't do anything to contravene the tenancy agreements. So, that's an important legal point to begin with. Throughout the report that Councillor Rich has compiled, he's put a lot of emphasis on the fact that the tenancies were long-term. But I think if you look through my own report, I've clearly established the timeline of the policy that was established by this council, and it was agreed at council across various stages, and again initially in the not too distant past. But it was always the case that this was a commercial venture on behalf of Daventry District Council, that it was the council acting as a private landlord, not this wasn't going to be social housing. So in that context, it's important to recognise the fact that long term, when we look at a tenancy agreement, is anything over 6 months. So given that these tenancies have been ongoing in many cases for upwards of 5 years, there's a strong argument to suggest that DDC has fulfilled its promise to deliver long-term letting accommodation as a private landlord. Now, I would question highly Councillor Rich's assertion that verbal discussion should be considered to form part of any contract. I think that anybody entering into a tenancy agreement will be aware that it's what's written down that bears weight, but both Councillor Rich and I have had sight of a key facts document that was provided to us. This set out the guidance given to the letting officers at the time, and nowhere in there was there any promise that, other than the fact that they would be on standard tenancy agreements. So that was the guidance given to officers at the time. I think it's important that the committee bears that in mind. Now, going back to the point that of the letter of January 2018, when the letter was circulated saying that if the sale took place, then the tenancies wouldn't be affected. That was indeed the case with the proposed sale at the time. That was the agreement that the council was seeking. So there was no suggestion that was anything but a well-intentioned indication. And of course, not so long after January 2018, through the work of this committee and then through an agreement at full council, we agreed not to sell the houses, precisely to look after the interests of the tenants who were still in there, given that any sale wouldn't be a benefit to the council, considering the fact that these homes were there for, as a commercial venture. Now, within Councillor Rich's report as well, So now I'll just reflect further on the fact that we are down to 6 original tenants now, and it's very clear from all the evidence that I've seen and all the discussions that I've had that the newer tenants have all gone in there again on standard tenancy agreements. And whilst I think it's a matter of regret that the perception has taken hold that these homes were there for something more than a a long-term let in the in the market understanding of the phrase. All the evidence that we've seen, all the context of the decision taken by council, the guidance given to the letting officers, and the approach that DDC took to issuing standard tenancy agreements actually sets out a pattern of behaviour suggesting that DDC always intended to act as a private landlord, to use these houses, in the intention agreed by full council. So, I believe that the policy agreed by council has been followed. I don't believe that there's been, any serious wrongdoing, by this body. And I would, stick, by my recommendations. I think the apology for, the disappointment, the distress, and any adverse experience that people have undergone is appropriate. It's a matter of decency to issue an apology when people feel let down. But I also strongly believe that there is no evidence to warrant going further and awarding compensation when ultimately that compensation would be taken out of taxpayer money, and we have to have the strongest evidence base before we consider taking that very, very serious step. It is anybody's prerogative to believe that the council could have done better, or that the policy is wrong, that we could have implemented a better policy, but you have to travel a very long distance from that conclusion to a conclusion that warrants you awarding compensation. So, I feel very strongly, having listened to all the residents who have contacted me, having spent many hours discussing the matter with officers, wading through a large body of evidence, that the conclusions I've reached in my report are balanced and fair, and they should be the recommendations that go forward to strategy group.
Anyone else have any comments?
Just a couple if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
This business about what these are is ASTs, short hold tenancy agreements, and they're very common in the commercial sector. I know a bit about this because I have quite a few myself. The answer to anybody's question about the legality of these things is cut and dried. Anything discussed verbally takes the back seat when it comes to an agreement in writing. I can absolutely assure you that the writing takes precedence. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. And I have a mind of contemplation in order to prove that. But it is a fact. Now, when it comes to letters of apology, we're on dangerous ground, because we're setting a precedent, and it has to be, as you quite rightly point out, without prejudice, simply because we can't take it into consideration in reality when it comes to the legalities of the situation, and therefore it actually doesn't have much meaning. It can only be challenged when you go against what you said, if you see what I mean. An apology is just an apology, and nothing more than that. Without prejudice means we're not setting a precedent here. We're not changing anything that it says in the agreement, and because of that, I think Councillor Brown was quite correct that we cannot give compensation in the way that's been described, because we haven't actually done anything wrong according to law.
Got anything to say? Councillor Ritchie?
If I can just respond on a few of these things. Councillor Robertson has said that written agreements take precedence in law. Which you said that as a fact, and then you added, and it's your opinion. So it may be your opinion that it's a fact.
The law is everybody's opinion. I happen to be qualified in law, therefore I can express an opinion.
Well, I only raised this case because in looking around and discussing with lawyers, there are actually cases elsewhere where challenges have been made over the actions of a councillor, and I cannot for the life of me remember which one it was,
That would be interesting.
And it wasn't Daventry, but it was a case where it was, you know, it was successfully argued that if in making a sale, and I suppose it's the same law that applies for making a sale, but it's commonplace that if something has been misrepresented, even misrepresented orally to the prospective purchaser or prospective tenant, then there is legal comeback on that. So it's not. It strikes me that that one is not quite successful. I don't think my argument is not based on the law. It's based on common decency. Yeah, look, I know that we have got to be conscious that we use council taxpayers' money in a way that is prudent. Do you really think that we have got council taxpayers, or loads of council taxpayers, in this district who would expect their council to not to behave decently and rationally towards people who had had a very, very rough deal from that council? I don't think that we can use an argument that the council taxpayers collectively would not like this. Where is the evidence for that?
Respectfully, that wasn't my argument. My argument centred around the fact that if we were to make any recommendations surrounding the use of council taxpayers' money, then we have to do so based on evidence.
Well, the evidence is. What I have put before you, but Councillor Brown will have seen the fuller documents from which I have taken these various quotations. It is there throughout this idea that although this was a short-term tenancy, a fairly standard tenancy agreement, there was a perception that seems to have been allowed to exist and even encouraged through some of these quotes, that because this was a short-term tenancy, this tenancy agreement was with a council. About the third page, I have taken the names out, said according to Officer B. They shared the delight of being able to rent a place for a longer duration, as they were not expecting the council to dispose of these properties anytime soon, unlike a private landlord, where it is less certain when the landlord requires possession. I believe I echoed the same sentiment by reiterating the position of DDECL. And of course that position, Councillor Brown referred to the key facts document, where I have that quote below. Our desire is for you to remain our tenants for the long term, and as long as you meet your obligations, we will support the achievement of this. Now that's a fairly clear statement.
Yes.
That does not seem to accord with the idea that these were people who could be, turfed out at 2 months' notice. The other comments from former staff, Officer C. Nobody would have told them they could stay forever, but one of the tenants said, I would not have agreed to disagree. So there was at least a degree of complicity in the way in which these were marketed as something that was different from the sort of short-term tenancy that you would get from an estate agent on the high street. The fact that even if it were, this member of staff does not say what her own view was, but it said that I would not have agreed or disagreed, that there would have been no attempt. If the tenants had a false interpretation, it is admitted that they would have not have attempted to correct that. I just think that what was done, I think was probably done at the time with with best of intentions. I don't mean that merely the council's intention to make loads of money, but in terms of the way in which tenants were going to be treated. I can't remember the actual quote that was put up on the website. I can remember looking at the website when this issue first arose. The website seems to have vanished without trace. but it is full of talking about wanting to give a first-class experience to tenants. This wasn't a standard thing that you would get from Harkins and Harrison or any other people who, deal in lettings around the district. This was something that was special, and I just feel that it shouldn't have happened. Perhaps the district council and its officers should have been much more bloody-minded at the time and made it perfectly clear that there were going to be no guarantees. But that did not happen, and that idea of a longer-term tenancy was perpetuated by the statement, for example, from Daventry from the Key Facts document, and even by the letter that was sent back in 2017 on the prospect of the Holy See being sold. The fact that they took the trouble to write, that even if the sale proceeds, your tenancy will not be protected. Now, you would never get a commercial landlord writing to tenants in these terms if the commercial landlord had a prospect of selling a property. I just feel that we haven't been fair.
Thank you, Councillor. Has anyone else got anything to say?
Well, I would like just to come back on a couple of things there. And actually, the sentiment of the whole thing, I partly agree with you, Councillor. It does appear that, we've been a bit heavy-handed. It appears that way a little bit. We haven't broken the law, and I think you would acknowledge that. Really, we have not broken the law, and therefore we can't spend public money putting that like a breach right. All we may have been is a little bit unsympathetic.
Why can't we spend public money?
Well, it sets precedent for a start. That's my view. I don't want to get into a banter.
We've never had a case like this before. A precedent for what?
I would just finish by saying that I think Councillor Litch's sentiments are expressed in entirely good faith and with the greatest of sympathy, and it's I commend him for that. But I would simply emphasise that this has been a long-term undertaking, in the normal understanding of the phrase. The houses have been rented out now for 5 years. They'll continue to be rented out for, probably, a good year or so more. And I'll just, quote one phrase that is in Councillor Rich's report and that he hasn't put in bold, which is that there was never any undertaking that these would persist forever. So these were there for long-term rental. They have been rented out long-term, but it is sadly the nature of the rental market in this country that it isn't the most stable of circumstances.
Daventry Lincoln is not the most stable.
I accept that.
Can I just give you a legal test? Yeah. I don't know whether you want it or not. I don't necessarily have to give
let's hear it, and then because
all right, well,
we have to make a
there is the legal test which describes the difference between a freehold and a tenancy, and that test is time. If there is a limit of time, it's a tenancy. If it's a tenancy. If it's no limit of time, it's a freehold. If there's to be no limit of time, then we've given away a freehold.
Thank you. I'm not sure that gets us anywhere.
Well, I don't know if it does not, but the argument is there was homes forever. It can't be done.
The point is, there's some recommendations on table. There is some counter recommendations. I'm not quite sure how we handle those. Handle the contradiction. Say on point 4.
Yeah, perhaps I can help you, Chairman, on this. Essentially, what you've got before the committee is a set of recommendations which are included in the papers. You've also had another set of recommendations that were introduced during the debate by Councillor Ritchie. They are Councillor Ritchie's recommendations are sort of marked up as a minority report. Actually, the Constitution doesn't allow a minority report to be received by this committee, but I think in the way that Councillor Ritchie has introduced it into the debate, I think that's fine. That's not a problem. So, as a committee, you need to decide on what your recommendations are going forward. There is an option of a minority report could go forward if committee isn't able to fully agree a set of recommendations. So that option is still open, assuming committee don't agree unanimously a set of recommendations.
Do we need Councillor Ritchie to offer an amendment to this and then vote on his amendment, or do we vote and then vote to
Well,
the table?
I think the recommendations before us serve as a proposal, don't they?
Yeah, I know it's a proposal. It's proposed for recommendation to the strategy.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, in terms of the way the councils and committees normally do their business, then you would take an amendment first. So if Councillor Ritchie is proposing a set of amendments or additions to the recommendations, then you could consider that as an amendment and deal with that first. And then
I think if the evidence in agreement, I think that's the way to do it. So, Councillor Ritchie was.
Well, I will propose as an amendment that the recommendations made by Councillor Brown are supplemented by those that are at the top of my paper.
We have an amendment put forward by Councillor Ritchie, so it's down to members to vote on it, members of the committee. So all those in favour?
Does the Constitution require a second?
Sorry.
yes, it would require a second.
Is there a second of Councillor Ritchie's motion? Sorry, that's a no.
So on that basis, without a second, that falls. So you then go back to the.
Do you want to take them one by one, or are you happy to take 1 to 4?
I think if we propose them en masse, and then if there's any dissent, then we can.
Okay. So all in favour of? Sorry, if you want to propose them.
Yeah, I'll propose the recommendations as they stand.
Okay. Second of that. Second, Councillor Amy Howard. All those in favour? That's agreed. Against?
And as against.
So, recommendations as recommended by Councillor Howard.
I think, Chairman, when you're still in the chair, I think just for clarity, but although I can understand the Councillor Ritchie may want some time to consider this, if he is in a position to say whether he would want a minority report to go forward.
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Can we just do that, or do we have to vote on that?
No, I think that will be captured in the minutes.
So, Councillor Ritchie, your minority report will go forward.
To strategy.
Can that be amended at all, or can it, as we've discussed here, or does it have to go through as it's been presented to the committee?
I think it is a minority report from one of the TICE panel members. I think it's the right thing that it goes forward as it is.
No objection to that.
And I think just to clarify the process, then the two sets of recommendations will go forward together, and then the two statutory group and the statutory group will consider them together.
With a note on the voting of how it actually.
Yes. Yeah.
And just to clarify, that won't be strategy on this Thursday, it will be the next.
No, that's correct. The agenda is already out, strategy group on Thursday this week, so the earliest it could do is the next strategy group, which I believe is April.
So, just so everyone knows, that's not an overall decision, that's not an end decision, because it has to go through the strategy group and then to full council. There's two more decision processes in that, so both sets of recommendations will go through to strategy
The 7th of March.
on the 7th of March. before a decision of what goes forward to the full council.
Chairman,
There's an opportunity to make representations.
Chairman, the 7th of March is the earliest it can go to. There's no guarantee.
That's what I said, hopefully. I did say that.
Oh, right, sorry.
But thank you, Tony, for that.
The answer to that is yes, full council.
You can make representations at full council, written representations.
Chairman, sorry, there isn't provision for representations to be made at council.
Full council.
Full council, not from members of the public. Unless a question is
Yes,
asked.
by way of a question, that is. By way of a question, not during the council. You can actually put a question to council.
Just one question,
A question.
as in PMQs.
Yeah, a question, I mean, if that, for instance, there's four, that could be four questions. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct, Chairman.
So you do have means of representation. And of course, you can always contact your councillors as well, in addition to that. Back to you then, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. And if people want to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, we'll wait a few moments for you to depart. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Wesley, for your assistance there, and then you're now in the hot seat yourself with take assignment 26, which is your report on parking in the Daventry estates, which I believe Councillor Ritchie also assisted page 11. Yeah.
Sit in front of me on the side. Thank you, Chair. So, the purpose of the report was to try and improve residence parking and road access in residential areas. Primarily for Daventry, but hopefully there'll be some items in there that actually apply to the whole district. Again, this was taken on in good faith to a real significant problem that we see absolutely, well, I say absolutely everywhere, but in nearly every community in the district and probably beyond. So when you start looking at it, it is actually quite daunting. It also comes about that there's a number of different agencies that look after these things. There's no single agency, and the actual truth is that most of the legalities and functions of this are actually outside the remit of this council. However, me and Councillor Ritchie did have a through search around, and I will have to say thank you to Councillor Ritchie for diligent work in trying to get information out of Northamptonshire County Council, which proved, I think, difficult, if not impossible was the word, but he did manage to glean some information from that. I have to say the officers at Daventry District Council were certainly more forthcoming in their assistance, so thank you to them in assisting with this. If I'm absolutely honest, I think it would have been quite nice to think that there's a magical solution to this problem, and it did become apparent that there were no magical solutions. There were just some things that we can possibly do that, to be honest, if I'm really honest, aren't actually that exciting, and you can see those in the recommendations before you. We were also, just to add to it, I mean, we've actually heard from from Councillor Morgan tonight and from Audra that this council is about business as usual, but we did have a mind to where is all this going in the new within the new authority, and to that end we were quite keen to keep it business as usual and try and get something in place, even if it can't be implemented by this council. It's actually flagged up, hopefully going forward into the new council, because we believe that this issue is right across, as I've already said, right across the county, in every community, and these things do need action, and they do need sensible action. We keep bringing our hands to these things, and I think all of us see issues every day. And in fact, just maybe declaring an interest here, although it wasn't in the Daventry district, it was in the South North Dance districts, I did get a puncture the other day, well my wife did, by having to bang up a curb over in Kissenbury to try and squeeze through a very, very small access point to get to our mother's house. So these things do have consequences, which in my case was £61.75. So that's me promoting my interest there. Anyway, the report's in front of you. The recommendations are there. As you see, there are things that we can do. It's pretty much in terms of publicity, and it's pretty much in trying to push this council to get the higher authority or the new authority to enable some further action in terms of drop curbs and concrete grass verges. And there it is in front of you. So we're open to any questions on that basis. And
the first thing I would say is well done on the amount of work you've clearly done. It's obvious that you've done a fair old tour of Daventry to establish the parking situation across the park. My main area of what you will doubt concern is when it comes to the fourth and fifth recommendations that involve assistance from the county council. Councillor Howard, I hope will probably agree with me that expecting anything in the way of additional expense from the highways department at the county council is highly optimistic. In fairness to them, their budgets are stretched to breaking point. Councillors over there have had to campaign like mad to get winter gritting back into the highways budget. There isn't going to be an awful lot of money for the kind of work that's being recommended in this report. I think the first three recommendations, personally, I have no issue with whatsoever. The fourth, the NCC, Kier WSP, the Highways Department at the County Council, do always say, if you provide the funding, we can do the work. So I think there's possibly a tweak to the fourth recommendation, in that if we were to recommend that DDC fund the works, then the County Council would probably be more than willing to undertake them. However, I think the prospect of NCC installing the reinforced concrete stud verges, to be brutally honest, it's not going to happen.
I mean, sure, we can go back some time, and I can't remember what council meeting it was in which we actually, a proposal was put. It's not proposed that we charge NCC, there's no way they would pay. NCC, however, have a policy that says that it will consider creating parking bays on grass verges. It will consider doing that, provided there are a few provisions about that it's close to a junction or if it's causing an obstruction for something else. But they'll do that, provided that there's a district council that pays the money. So I think there's always understood in discussions with NCC, with NCC Highways, that there are issues in which they might need to formally give approval, but it would be DDC that paid, and in some cases the DDC would actually need to instigate the works by approaching one of the contractors that NCC keeps on its approved list. I've got to say that this project has been running quite a bit of time, and it began before the Max Scala report. And I would say that over my contacts with NCC, their resistance to doing things has actually reduced somewhat. And it's almost as if, by this stage, their message is, if you're going to pay for it, you can do what you damn well like. It doesn't concern us any longer. But I've got to admit to having been fairly frustrated over what was originally an approach that said, look, you can't have concrete studs because that's not within our policy. Even you pay for it, it's not our policy. Now it appears they're actually putting concrete studs elsewhere in the county. So if you're paying for it and you find somebody to do with it, well, that's your problem. The drop curb option is a more complicated one. And I feel that one of the difficulties, having been in this dust panel, is that it takes us in, unless we are getting a sort of very positive response from the people who need a response from, there's a danger that we as councillors get into the position of needing to actually propose solutions, rather than in the position of telling officers that here is a problem, we would like you to find a solution. The concrete studs originally came up as an idea in Cowper Road. Now my predecessor, Councillor Long, actually produced a whole plan marking out exactly where the parking bays would be in Cowper Road. Well, I just don't see that. It's not my skill, I'm afraid.
So Councillor Wesley, I think, wanted to just add a comment.
Sorry, no, I'll just for a minute, I'll speak when the councillor is.
The issue in Cowper Road, for those who have actually known and seen it, we did a survey of residents on parking in Cowper Road. They say that at the moment there's not a parking problem in Cowper Road because they all park on the verge. And many of them, some of them have put gravel down over the top of NCC's grass verge. Some have actually put hard standing over it. Some have run concrete slabs over it so that they can get in. All, totally illegal. But it is the only way, they say, that they can actually keep Cowper Road open. Now, the dropped curb issue, I was actually alerted more to the dropped curb issue in Burns Road by Maria Taylor. Now, for those of you who know Burns Road, it can be a nightmare getting along. It is very narrow. It is a bus route. It is one of the few ways of getting in and out of the headlands. So it is a busy road. It is narrow. You almost always have cars parked all the way along the one side. The only reason that you can get traffic past is that the cars on the other side are all parked in the gardens. I mean, there are no sort of hedges or lawns or anything. They're all parked in the gardens, and yet not all of them have got permission to have a drop curb. Now, the height of the curb means that you don't physically necessarily need to drop the curb, but unless you have paid the required amount of money to NCC, you're not allowed to drive a car over the pavement and park in your front garden. And that seems to be an absurdity. If they are going to actually have the curb dropped, and NCC insists that the work is not just lowering the actual curb, it's strengthening the pavement and everything else between the roadway and where you're going to leave your car. The average cost for a contractor to do it is something like down to 2,300. Onto that, add there's a figure here, a ridiculous amount of money that has got hundreds of pounds. It has got to be paid, even to get NCC to consider giving you a licence to do it. Now, the people who do that, particularly in Burns Road, are not people who have got loads of money to spend and where they park their car. I suspect that most of the homes there are even housing association homes. And I've got to say, there were difficulties being suffered from NCC. I never even got acknowledgements from Futures. But we hope that people will park in Burns, particularly in Burns Road, in their gardens, because otherwise the traffic can't move and we've got a big problem. Why should they be required to actually pay for it? And I just feel that is an area. I'm not sure that we have got the right solution. NCC tells me that putting up line of reform is probably not going to do very much. But somebody actually, people who know about what needs to be done in terms of construction, of strengthening of pavements and dropping curb and things, among the people who naturally know about what what the law allows you to do and what it doesn't, to get together and come up with a way of solving that. And I just feel that we need to actually press for that.
Yeah, I think Councillor just sort of said it. Maybe I should say about where we see this is ending up being a bit of an enabling and a push forward to actually get something going. I understand about what you're saying. Expectations are one thing, but actually asking people to do it is not about expectation. It's actually raising an issue and actually putting it in the sphere where people can actually start doing something about it that is within their remit, because it's not actually within our remit. We haven't actually got officers here that look after drop curves and putting cars on pavements. It's not what they do. Very, very helpful in pointing us in the right directions, and a certain amount of the legal stuff that actually sort of says yes you can, no you can't, or you possibly can do this sometimes but you can't do it another time. And the whole situation is quite crazily mixed up. And what it needs is, instead of everyone going, I can't do it and I can't do it, I can't do it because it's not in our remit, and I can't do it because we haven't got any money. At the end of the day, we're blocking fire engines, we're blocking ambulances, we're blocking police cars, we're causing road rage and all sorts of general hassles for people's quality of life. And it isn't just Burns Road, and it's not just Cabell Road, it's all out in the villages, and it's absolutely everywhere. Now, if this kicks off, then people get a template and an understanding of what can actually happen. And I think Councillor Richard would agree with me that that's where we are with this report, really. It's a recognition that we got a little bit stuck with actually actions because there's no one to do it, but we need it kicked off with the people that can, and I think that's what we're saying. So we're not asking for miracles. What we're asking for is just the start of a process. So we may take it on another stage, and then we might have to do some more work to say, yeah, we need to do a survey up there and but we believe that not doing anything isn't an option, because it's getting worse and worse and worse. And until we all have electric vehicles on some sort of call thing, good job Colin Paul's not here, but that the cars are with us for the next X number of years, and there's major issues around in villages and towns, and we need to start something that needs to be flagged up, because
Councillor Robertson, Councillor Howard, any thoughts, comments?
Well, I was just going to tell you a little tale. Years ago, I actually applied to Leicestershire County Council at the time to have a drop curb put in my house. And not only did they approve it, they came and did it. And it cost 15 quid. This was a long time ago, but, how things have changed. We're now talking about £2,000 to £3,000.
Recommendation 6, right to Leicestershire County. Councillor Howard, any?
I'm in support of this.
Okay. Matches with the last recommendations. If we take them en masse, I see we have a proposer, Councillor Wesley.
Yeah.
And,
That is a second.
I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Committee.
Okay, so assignment 27 is my new project on voluntary services support. Now, we've actually heard a little bit about this, funnily enough, from Julie earlier on in the evening. Part of my work thus far has actually been kind of getting down into the underlying data, establishing a bit more of the qualitative side of things, looking at the spread of the different voluntary services that we are supporting as a county council, as a district council, and I've written to the majority of the voluntary services that we're supporting, asking for their feedback on their relationship with the district council. I'm due to have meetings with the portfolio holder and officers to provide more in-depth detail. I think it's interesting in the context of hearing about the budget earlier that we had a debate not so long ago at council about the level of support that we provide, and there was clearly expressed will from some parties that we should go further and provide more support. Clearly the financial support, whilst important, isn't the only form of support that we are able to give to the voluntary services. We can also provide logistical support, we can provide support via publicity, and so I'm exploring areas of, let's say, non-financial support that the district council can provide to the voluntary services to promote volunteerism, to promote the services that they're offering, and my report will explore those areas in addition to the pure numbers of how much we're providing, what the comparative offering is from similar district councils across the country, and where we should be in terms of best practice in supporting the voluntary sector. So that is where I'm at now. I will I'll have an interim report in writing at the next scrutiny meeting, because it's not too far down the line, and I'll then have a full report at the meeting after that. So, any questions at this stage? Any helpful suggestions about where I might like to focus my attentions?
As an observation, when collecting information on voluntary organisations and what they do, it's also therefore collecting information on what they see as being the needs in the area. And it just occurs to me that as we move towards the possibility that we might become defunct and that there is simply a West Northants authority, of course there are decisions that could be taken about what is devolved, but on the other hand, if we were looking at the entire area of West Northants, there is often just an assumption that by far the greatest needs are in Northampton town, and voluntary organisations within the district, if they want to continue receiving funds, are probably going to need to improve the evidence that they produce so that they can actually hold their ground in any discussions that come up.
That's a very, very good point, and actually one of the things that's become apparent so far is the importance of voluntary services, not just in urban areas but in rural areas as well. There is I've been to a couple of Northampton Borough Council meetings, and I think Councillor Morgan may recall, there is a perception amongst some people in urban areas that everyone in villages is driving around in a Range Rover down the bottom of a 1 mile long gravel drive, and whereas there are serious pockets of deprivation in villages, not only in Daventry district, but also in South Northants, and so it's not. I'm not going to try and make too much of a thing about the urban-rural divide, but I will be highlighting the importance of not ignoring the needs of urban areas, because actually there is always a very real risk of isolation in urban areas because of lack of transport links, dwindling community assets, and other factors. So, Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and just to expand on that a little bit, it's also what is rural and what is urban. As a resident of this town, I think for a lot of people it's regarded as urban, but in fact it's in some ways it's got all the disadvantages of both. It's actually got the disadvantage of being a rural town, and with nothing of the urban infrastructure. So you can't match Daventry and Northampton. And that was going to come to mind. But really, I think two things have been said here, and it also occurred to me from a town council meeting yesterday. Voluntary organisation, and it's a question that I actually raised during the presentation. I think sometimes there's voluntary organisations that know pretty much exactly what they're doing, where to go and how to do it. They're sorted, they're run, they're professional. You then got the out and out volunteers that I think, as Councillor Ritchie said, I perceive a need for. These people haven't got a clue where to go and how to do it, and so they might come here. They might go to the parish council. They might just go and knock on the door at Waitrose and say, "Can I have some cash, please? And can I put some of those green counters in your counter bin?" It's disparate, and you see it at parish council. I see it at parish council level because you do see them face to face. One of the most important things is actually directing them to actually be able to put forward a proposal and a plan in some sort of template.
It goes back to the logistical support.
That's real support, which is critical. Also, as we go forward to unitary, in a way, you're obviously taking out a layer. You're actually taking out another layer of localities, like where they go. Even more important, the parishes and the new unitary are in unison in actually helping people volunteer. And I think the links there to ensure that it could be that, and it's quite often, if you could get funding from here as the global, and funding from the very local, from parishes and or businesses and or from people in the area, that is such an important thing. And a really useful piece of work, but how do you tie the two up? How do you actually have a liaison between the two? Because you've got these poor guys, when we had one the other day, he's literally running around, I won't say like a headless chicken because that's unfair, but it's just, going up and suppose, can I have some money? Well, yeah, you need to fill out this. Or can I have some money for you? Yeah, but you need to fill out this. And all of a sudden he's got two fairly thick documents to fill out to try and get the £400. It's onerous, it's difficult, and it's quite right. It's things like that can help. Maybe there should be people out there to actually help direct and coordinate. Is there a mechanism of coordinating funding activity? The core of it. That's what I'm saying.
That's all really useful. I'll certainly bear all of that in mind as I continue with my work, and look forward to presenting the interim report next time around. So having covered assignment 28 already, we're now on to assignment 29, review of DDC antisocial behaviour covered strategy. Can we as a council do better? Councillor Howard, can we?
So since the scoping document was approved, I made contact with Ken Fagan and the Community Partnership Manager, who actually has members of his team and multi-agencies that have a meeting, I believe it's it's actually called Hashbag. Yeah, that's it. Hasbag. Which includes hate and antisocial behaviour across the district in South Northamptonshire. This meeting is actually being held up as a model as good practice within Northamptonshire. And I have a meeting actually very soon with him in a few days to discuss further about how DDC deals with reports of antisocial behaviour and how we work with partners to address issues related to individuals and areas. I've also contacted Maria Taylor, the community manager, regarding DDC's arrangements in place with the ease of access to information, as well as I've had a few meetings with the portfolio holder, Councillor Adam Hills, and my task members are currently ongoing, reviewing and contacting the members and officers from neighbouring comparison councils. There's still quite a lot to do, but I believe we're on track for completion in April.
Very good. Any emerging themes so far? Any particular kinds of antisocial behaviour that you're looking at more than others?
At the moment, there's quite a few individuals, so I can't really comment at the moment. But you will see. You will see in the outcome where it was directed.
Any questions? Any guidance for Councillor Howard?
No, again, I mean, obviously, the DDC isn't the actual policeman as such, are they? You know, so it's about coordination, and I think you can almost, the things that we just said about Councillor Brand's assignment as well, you're seeing PCSOs being put in place by various parishes around the district. Those PCSOs are becoming vital. Listen to talk from Sergeant Dobbs the other day on what they're doing, and you know, the police, the PCSOs, and anything else are absolutely desperate for information to be fed back. And I think, you know, if DDC is going to do anything, it is again about facilitating coordination and being a hub to actually understand what is going on and where it's going on. Because the main thing from the police is, although they are stretched to the absolute limit, if they don't know about it, they can't go back and ask for more resources. And that's really what came out of the listening post there. And I think DDC and the new authority should be collating that information from the police, from PCSOs, and from the general public as well, to understand what is going on and what needs to be done. For me, that's really, really important. And it comes back into voluntary services, providing things for people to do, to get people off the streets, to do all the right stuff. And I'll say that's part of the DDC place. You know, it's prevention rather than cure. What else can we do to help the various organisations that may be there to stop it happening in the first place, as opposed to walking people up that are doing it, but doing that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Howard. Finally, we have assignment 30 and Councillor Robertson, your scoping document, which comment as you would like.
Well, thank you, Chair. This now has been approved, as you know, and apologies to the committee for it taking so long. It's partly due to the fact that I've moved house, and it's taken up rather a lot of my time. Now, this is all about, obviously, the implementation of the new 123 Plus service for waste collection in the area, and it's got nothing to do with improvement. The improvement's probably already been made. It's got to do with this committee's scrutineering what we do, what the council does. So, and I thought it would be interesting for us to know how things were going. We've already heard from the resources management team that basically the finances of the thing are going very well, and it appears that everything's quite okay with that. And in fact, I've excluded that sort of thing from this scoping. Basically, I didn't want to look at what the costings were. I just want to look at whether or not the general public perceive this as being an improvement, at least, or at least an efficiency, as far as they're concerned. Now, after 6 months, it's not a bad thing that this has taken a while to get going, as a matter of fact, because the more time people are given to get used to it, the better they're going to perceive it. And as a consequence of that, I don't believe that the delay is going to have an adverse effect on the findings. Now, to go through things one at a time, I'm said to be leading this, and I'm going to be consulting with Councillor Joe Guildford, amongst others, and that's the only thing that the senior management team and leaders, portfolio holders, changed with regard to this document. Really, they just wanted to put me in the right direction as far as interviewees were concerned, and which is fine, and I think they've got that right. So what I'm actually looking for now is some assistance with this process, because I don't believe I can do it all by myself. One of the chief reasons I can't do it all by myself is because I am no good at writing reports. There are people here that are very good at writing reports, and I'm trying to elicit some assistance in that respect. The objectives are public expectations. Is it an improvement, or is it going to, at least are we doing our job, and the efficiency of the process. Now, I can't really question that too much, because at the moment the thing is split between this authority and the county council, which is, to my mind, crazy. But anyway, that's what we've got, and that will, of course, change if we go to unity. And that's, again, not fully decided yet. But, having said that, the question does need to be asked, and I planned to find out about those things by asking parish councils rather than individual members of the public. I think it's a more efficient way of doing it, because they'll have all the feedback they need. That's quite a big sector of them. It'll be 75, something like that, local parish councils. Quite a lot of them. So I plan to put out an email to them all and see what the response is, basically.
I'm sure they would be more than happy to respond with feedback on the new service, because it's been a constant theme. My parishes, Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, I think it's very well. Just as a case in point, Daventry Town Council actually voted to write a letter of thanks to Norse the other day for their exemplary efforts around Daventry at the moment, because the parish council in Daventry is actually more than quite pleased with their efforts. So just a little bit. So don't expect a bombardment of all negative stuff. No, because there was reports on it and nothing but praise. Things can always get better, and I'm sure that we can ask for that. As far as things go, obviously the parking when it's finished now, so I haven't got them, so I'm needed on that one.
Well, that'd be great if you could sort of take on some of it. I'd be very welcome.
Yeah, unless anyone else has got another urgent task plan for me to look at, because I actually haven't got it off my own.
You have got a volunteer.
At the end of this agenda item, there's something that I want to open up for discussion within the committee. One thing I would say, Councillor Robertson, is I think just need to clarify precisely what it's looking at, because you mentioned NCC and its finances. That isn't applicable.
No, it's not finance. I'm not looking at finance in this. The actual collection of the waste and the distribution of waste from then on is dealt with by a different authority, and am I right in that?
Yeah. The disposal is a county matter. Yeah.
And so we can go so far with this.
But I mean, I think if you're looking purely, you can almost simplify it in a way. If you're looking purely at the 1, 2, 3 service and public expectations and maybe the efficiency of the collections and our recycling rates, which is beholden on us as a service provider, that would probably eliminate the need to start delving too much into county council matters.
Oh no, I didn't intend to. I was just pointing it out.
Fair enough. Any further comments? Or one thing I would just point out, we're lacking a task due completion date at this stage. Catherine, obviously we've got our next meeting on 2nd of April. When are the subsequent 2 meetings, please?
28th of May and 16th of July.
Well, I shall be away in May, so that might be difficult to. And then it's not till July, so it should be a whole year.
Can we aim? Can we aim for a completion date in July?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Super. Okay, right. Further to what's on the agenda, but it does fall under the rolling work programme. We've just touched on it slightly. Obviously, we now have an additional meeting in Scrutiny improvement. We're up to 6 meetings. Changes the tempo and the timetable ever so slightly. So I've agreed with Tony and Catherine that we're going to distribute a timetable of deadlines when reports have to be over to SMT, and I'd just like to get a group agreement on SLA, a service level agreement, if you like, of when we're expecting task panels to be completed by. I think it's reasonable in the current environment to focus more on maybe slightly shorter task panels, try and get them completed within 3 meetings of S&I.
Yep.
I'm willing to take the view of the committee.
I mean, yes, business as usual for me, but within the context of where we are, and it's pointless putting in, for me it's fairly pointless putting in an 18-month project at the moment. It is genuinely pointless, isn't it? So, short and sweet is probably the thing. So,
I agree, better use of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, given the speed at which the meetings are going to come round, if you want to assist Councillor Robertson on a project, or Councillor Ritchie wants to assist elsewhere for one meeting, for 1 meeting's worth of time, before presenting your next scope and document and going down your own path, then that's fine. But obviously, as recipients of a special allowance, a certain amount of outputs required by committee members.
What I was thinking on this is maybe get this one kicked off with Councillor Robertson, and then come up with another one for me for the next time.
So it hasn't gone unnoticed that on tonight's agenda we've got a fair number of updates and completed reports and a scoping document coming through. I think we've spoken before about trying to pick up momentum and try and increase productivity, and I think we're getting there. And I think we really need to just continue in this vein and carry on getting our recommendations through to council, because ultimately I think we've demonstrated that we do make a difference, and we are making changes, however small they might be, but let's carry on doing that.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Tony's slot in the implementation activity.
Mr. Chairman, just through the action plan updates on page 39 in the back. First one is the customer satisfaction, which is assignment 16. That's now complete. We were waiting for an action in December, which has happened. So that's policy just completed, and we'll go on to the schedule for the policy implementation review in due course. Page 41 is assignment 17, which is the commercial property task panel. no change in this since last time, and it's something that I've been giving some consideration to and haven't got an answer yet. But if you note, the timescale for all the actions is ongoing, and I think we need to draw a line under those at some stage. So we'll come back with either a complete or a definitive date for that next time round.
Thank you.
Then on to page 43, on needs of fitness and wellbeing met in rural areas, assignment 19. That has one action outstanding, which is given a date of 2020, so whether we ever get there or not remains to be seen.
There is activity on that front.
Yes, there is activity.
On Thursday, I believe there's a strategy.
Yes. Then page 45, DDC and Parish Town Council cooperating over major planning applications, assignment 20. That has one outstanding action, which is action 4, and that's dated December 19, so some time to go before we can expect to see that completion.
Okay, that's out of our hands though, really, isn't it? And the plan's been submitted for examinations. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, then on to page 49. Can DDC do more to support the case of homelessness in the district, assignment 21. There's no change in the RAG status on that. We've got 3 still at amber. The first 2, actions 1 and 2, have dates against them. Action 5 is an ongoing action, and again, as with the earlier report, I think we need to discipline ourselves as officers to come back with something a bit more.
Actually, on that point, before we move on, Councillor Morgan, as you're with us, so I'm just reading here about the increased demand for bed and breakfast. I think you mentioned earlier that £400,000?
400,000.
Yeah, spending on bed and breakfast. Is that still increasing, do you know?
It has been actually. In fact, when we were, I'm not sure about the current trajectory, but we have been back at strategy meetings, and that's when all for group bids.
So certainly the financial demands are increasing, even if the numbers aren't.
Absolutely. Okay.
So I think, Jeremy, just on that, the legislation change, that's what's driven the
Homelessness Reduction Act.
Yes, which drove the need on the budget. Okay. And finally then, page 51, Scrutiny Task Panel, assignment 23, that's now agreed, given the council has approved the schedule for the information.
Just mention that as well. So,
Should we do that again?
thank you, Councillor Frenchman. Fantastic. So there aren't any one-year post-implementation activity reviews this month. So what we next have to decide is, the last item on the agenda, as there's no urgent business, is who we would like to invite along to the April meeting. Had Councillor Guildford's done quite a bit here. We had Councillor Miller last time out, and Councillor Morgan very kindly attending tonight. So.
I'm going to suggest that we invite Councillor Wayne Howard along. I have a number of issues with IT that I want to discuss with him.
Is that outward-facing IT or internal?
Internal.
I'd probably manage a private discussion.
Yes, I would suggest that if it's not of interest to the public, we might benefit from keeping it as an internal matter.
I think we've probably already all had that discussion with
Just thinking through the rest of the... we've got homelessness... Sorry, yes.
Chair, I'm not sure if this means to suggest here actually, but
You're welcome to chip in.
thank you. I'll make a contribution. Obviously, I chaired the meeting before you. It's been quite a while, I think, unless Councillor Hills has been along. And particularly with the debate around Reach for Health, that may be a possibility. But of course, that's entirely different.
Very fair suggestion.
Chair, I was going to say there's quite a number of unhoused projects floating around which are costing Councillor Morgan quite a lot of money.
My only other suggestion was going to be Councillor Auger, given his oversight of housing, homelessness, and all the rest. So
That would be.
I would be happy with either, so I'll take the majority view. So Councillor Howard.
I was actually about to say.
Well, you can drop the other Councillor Howard in it if you.
Maybe see it tonight. I'm not sure.
No, Councillor Auger is a very good idea.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But could I suggest we need Councillor Auger at some stage. I think though that is a meeting that we need to plan a little bit, because I know that it's not our job to reorganise local government, but it is surely our job to make sure that thought has been given to how others are going to do it. One of the big issues that would come up if we were to form a West Northampton unitary is that Northampton Borough has its own housing stock. We don't. We had a housing association that is now so remote from us that we've got next to almost a sense of it, a little bit of control of what we do. And what are the implications of that, thought through to actually to protect the interests of people in Daventry district in making this change? I've heard many in claiming that there'll be people in Northampton who are on the housing list who will welcome the opportunities that a bigger area provides to come and live in Daventry or Brackley or somewhere different or something different. On the other hand, housing that may be an offer for people who are homeless in Daventry. Daventry is merely a place that the post office will deal with. Maybe we offer housing in Northampton, and it's how we think about that. What we obviously there are going to be councillors, there are going to be consultants and commissioners. They're all going to be thinking about how we do that. But I feel that we as ordinary councillors at the same time need to make sure that they're happy with what is being done and what is being thought about.
And I think, I'm always to get Councillor Auger in. I think we've had a homelessness thing item on the agenda tonight with Amber's on it. I think it's a good point to push it, quiz it, and get some info, because sometimes these questions, what they're for is for us to actually think about another task panel to maybe improve things. And if we're on a fairly tight, as we've discussed, on a tight schedule, if there's anything another thing on the homelessness and housing agenda that needs looking at very quickly, then let's get Councillor Auger in.
So I'm sensing that we're happy to have Councillor Auger in to talk about housing stock and homelessness issues. Well, I think the positive about the new the new timetable is that actually we won't have very long to wait before we can get Councillor Hilton. It's only going to be at the end of May.
I'm saying as a substitute if he's not.
Yeah, absolutely. So housing stock and homelessness issues. So all agreed, Councillor Auger. Okay, there's no urgent business, so thank you very much. Thanks everybody, and
Thank you.